but I didn't really like Chicken Joy.
This is a long episode about food.
Yes, God will provide. God is the one who made us pregnant to begin with.
Hey Zesties, welcome to the Gleeful Talkshow, where we share zesty stories to cultivate the happiness and hero within. I'm very excited for today's episode because it's a topic that's close to my heart. We are going to talk about the common perceptions about Filipinos. For example, that we are cute, joke. from from light to more
Mm-hmm.
serious topics, there's surely a lot of zesty stories on this episode. So, what's more exciting is that we are joined by one of the amazing people who runs the podcast for answering questions using their own experiences as Filipinos through funny, informative, and entertaining conversations. And yes, these guys are the OG inspirations for me for creating this podcast because I want to join in the fun. So please
Mm-hmm.
welcome Dee of Banana Q Podcast. Hi, Dee. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Glee. Thank you for having me on the show.
So, yes, Filipino stereotype. This is quite a juicy topic, and some of our zesties are non Filipino. So, hopefully, they will be able to understand or at least maybe know about us more. For example, in terms of language, currently you are in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Have you had some experiences about being stereotyped that you are good or bad at English?
I would say it's actually they're usually surprised. I don't know if they're surprised, and maybe they are, but like there are a few expats, like Caucasian expats, who have commented that, "Oh, you speak very good English." So I don't know if it's because they're surprised that I can actually speak English or not. It's of course a good thing for me, right? That's they're saying that I'm good, which is great, right? But at the same time, what does it mean? Do they think that the average Filipino then is not a good English speaker? I guess that's a commentary on that. But at the same time, I don't know if it's just Filipinos that they are not used to speaking good English. It could be because maybe Hong Kongers or other Asians in general are really not that fluent in speaking in English because of course it is not our first language, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would think. How about you?
Yes, I have a similar experience as well. So when I just first arrived here in Australia, fresh from the plane from Dubai, I had an interview with a job agency.
Okay.
So he said that, oh, you speak very good English. I don't know if
Mm.
they're really surprised or is it a good or bad thing, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel at first it was like, it was a compliment. But, so
Yeah.
afterwards, like, is it an insult for our race in general?
That's what I am wondering as well. But maybe it's not necessarily an insult. Maybe they're thinking it's just a compliment to us. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Filipinos are quite a mixed bunch, I would say, because of our different colonizers from the
Mm-hmm.
past. So, in terms of our physical appearance, did you receive some comments before that you are easily identifiable as Filipino?
Yeah, about that, I think I don't look like the typical Filipino. And because of that, usually if I travel somewhere within Asia, though, obviously not in UK or wherever, people assume that I'm a local of that place because I have this kind of look wherein you're not sure where I'm from. Like I could blend in a lot of places basically. Actually, I took a DNA test because of my
Oh.
curiosity as to why do I look like this. So it turns out that I'm actually one third Chinese, one third Vietnamese, and one third Filipino. And the Filipino is it's not exact one third. So the Filipino is the smallest one actually. I'm like biggest part is Chinese. Weirdly, I'm not entirely sure why or where or how that happened, but anyway, so that could explain why I don't look Filipino. And as you said, right, they usually make comments like that, like even in Singapore, where I stayed for 11 years, and also here in Hong Kong, I get a lot of comments like people are surprised when I don't speak the local language, right? Because, oh, I thought you were local. That's a very common assumption. And even in Singapore, a lot of people also made that assumption, right? They would think, oh, I thought you were either Chinese or Malaysian until you spoke because of my accent. My accent gave me away, you know. But that the way I look apparently is like, yeah, it's not what they expect. So
Oh.
yeah, that's my experience.
Speaking of accent, do you feel that we get a bit shy about our accent because it's not, it's a
Yeah, yeah.
Filipino accent?
Yeah, I would think yes. I think before, because it's the colonial mentality again, right? Like we want to sound American or some other white race, I guess. So if we speak the first time you listen to yourself and then you're like, "Oh my god, why do I sound so baroque?" or something like that. Or you feel like your accent is not really good. Maybe when I was younger, I felt that way, but now I mean, it's a part of who you are, right? That's who you are, and it's good that you have a Filipino accent because, like me, I don't look Filipino, but at least I sound like one. So there's my identity is still there. I've been outside the Philippines for over a decade, right? But then I still sound Filipino, and I think it's because I've made an effort to not adapt the accents of the other places that where I've been. For Filipinos, and not just Filipinos, right? We tend to adapt the accents where we are. So I think at the beginning when I moved to Singapore, I kind of like started adapting the Singlish accent or what. And then after a while, I thought I don't want to adapt their accent. So I made an effort to keep the Filipino accent. So I think I'm okay with that. How about you? Is the Australian accent probably for some people they like it better? Like I have friends who move to Australia and they're jealous of like their husband who sounds like Aussie.
Aussie?
And yeah,
Ah.
yeah.
Well, with regards to Aussie accent,
Mm.
some Aussie accents you can easily understand, but some you cannot really
Oh
understand.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But like with regards to that accent, even in the Philippines, like if you don't sound very American or very
Mm,
British accent, you feel like,
yeah.
oh, you're inferior. But now
Yes.
I realize that the Filipino accent, everyone can understand.
Yeah, I think the Filipino accent is a bit neutral. Yes,
Mm.
maybe it doesn't sound very posh to us. Americans go to the Philippines, right? They speak and they say, "Oh, he sounds so slang."
Yeah.
Whereas for us, we pronounce our A's like like bank. Let's go to the
Yeah.
bank, you know. but but you're right. They do find us easy to understand usually, unlike Singaporeans, for example. When we are on calls with people from North America, usually they have a hard time understanding Singaporeans, but I've never encountered that issue with me. They always had no problem understanding me. So yeah, I think we do have a pretty okay accent. Yes, maybe we would think it's bariotic, as my mom would put it, but I think it's okay. And it's really
Yeah.
just more about like, accepting that that's how we sound, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And even I received this comment from my husband that he also prefers the Filipino accent versus the Hungarian accent. I guess it's not easily it's,
It's okay, it's up to you.
it's
Right. I actually don't know what the Hungarian accent sounds like, but
yeah,
similar to
it's hard
anything.
to yeah, it's hard for me to say as well because I don't have the accent, but that's why he doesn't want to be a guest in this podcast.
Okay. Well,
But
that's too bad.
he's pretty good at English. He's
Mm-hmm.
just very shy about it.
Okay.
So personality wise, our dealings with other people, how did others find you or Filipinos in general?
Yeah, I would think that most people, at least to our face anyway, they always say, "Oh, I like Filipinos. You're very friendly. You're very warm." So that's good. But I don't know what they say behind our backs. You cannot tell.
Mm.
But anyway, but
Yeah.
usually it's usually that, right? Whenever there were foreigners who were visiting the Philippines, right, they would always comment about how warm the Filipinos are. And at that time when I was young, I was like, what's the big deal? Because everybody around us was the same, right? Like you cannot really
Yeah.
compare. Like you think, so what? Like, okay, so you're warm, you're hospitable and stuff. Like, so what's the big deal? Everyone's like that. But then you move out of the Philippines, and that is when you realize why they were always commenting that, because it really is different. The Filipino warmth is different. We're a bit too friendly, that which could be both good and bad, right? Like we're too close sometimes, like to the point like, oh my god. Like for example, you go to, for example, a waxing station to get a bikini wax or something. Sometimes the if the waxer is a Filipino, they say a lot of awkward things, like, like, come on. To the point that it doesn't seem professional. You know what I mean? Because we
Yeah.
are way too feeling close. But yeah, but that's the I guess, the negative part a bit. But I guess I would say it's still overall good, right? That means we're
Yeah.
friendly, we're easy to get along with. People say that, oh, we really like Filipinos and we like working with Filipinos because they are bubbly. They usually are positive people.
And speaking of working with us,
Mm,
people think or would have that perception, and even us Filipinos ourselves, that we are resilient in terms
mm,
of working. We are hard workers. And again, it's a good and a bad thing, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
there are some cases that because we are resilient, we
Mm,
are higher tolerance level in terms of abuses, let's just say, or
yeah,
yeah, being
unfortunately.
taken advantage of because we've been through a lot. We can just be tolerant about it,
Mm.
which is also a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. It's good that they think we are adaptable and that we work hard and we don't easily quit, that sort of thing, which is good. That's why
Yeah.
they like hiring Filipinos because of that. The turnover is not so high if your workers are Filipinos. But the problem is, as you said, you're right, that then they tend to abuse you more. Like, for example, Filipinos just accept a lower salary and they're fine. Like, we don't fight for an increase. If you get like a very lousy increase, and then you're fine. You don't really speak up about it. You're just happy you have a job, that kind of thing. And also, if they give you work and then you don't mind doing overtime and you don't push back. So that's the part that is not really good because they take advantage of the fact that we don't speak up.
Yeah, and also since we're flexible and adaptable
Mm-hmm.
people, in terms of the pandemic, in terms of how
Mm.
the world currently is, there was a shortage in Australia back then during the height of COVID. There was a shortage of toilet paper. I don't know if there was in Hong Kong.
I think it started in Hong Kong, actually, if I
Oh,
remember
really?
correctly. I wasn't here yet then, but I remember I was in Singapore and there was a news that made the headlines that the shortage began in Hong Kong because reason for that was they experienced SARS back in 2003.
Ah.
So they already knew what to expect. So they were the ones who were putting on the masks first. They ran out of masks very quickly. And then they also were the ones who hoarded the toilet paper first. I remember reading the news in Singapore, like, what? Why? And then after that, it happened in Singapore and everywhere else. So, like Australia.
Ah, when I was here, I was so surprised and was forgive me, but I was kind of laughing about it because it's
Mm-hmm.
a first world problem because for us, we can live without toilet paper. Uh,
True.
this is so TMI,
Uh
but it
huh.
is funny in a way that we use toilet paper, but if there's nothing there, then, we
Yeah,
can just
yeah.
use the water.
Yes, exactly.
Since we've talked about personality as well, we're both OFWs working in different countries. People have a certain
Mm.
perception that Filipinos are usually this type of profession, which is, I think, nurses. How about your experience?
I think in Singapore, yes, nurses, there are a lot of Filipino nurses as well. They found out you're a Filipino, they usually assume that you're either a nurse or a domestic helper, or I think the other one is probably the retail workers.
When I was in Dubai, there were a whole lot of Filipino waiters and waitresses. And I received some comments from non
Mm.
Filipinos that they do prefer Filipino workers because they are warm and they are like, sir, ma'am, very friendly and very welcoming. And if you eat in a restaurant that has a Filipino waiter or waitress, they feel well taken care of. So that's what I heard from foreign friends, people, etc.
Ah, yeah, I think I would think, yeah, in Hong Kong, there's like a lot of Filipinos who are working in restaurants as well. Like maybe every other restaurant you go into, there would be a Filipino server, yes. And yeah, they do tend to be warm. Maybe it's just because I'm used to that kind of service from the Philippines, right? So if you're used to that and then you get service from somebody else, it feels different. You're right.
But it's not only just because it's between Filipino, because here, what I heard from other people, how the service here in Australia is different that
Mm,
in Asia. So in Asia in general. So I guess maybe it's also part of our culture being Asians as well.
mm,
So that was the difference. That's what I heard. I guess it springs from our home, right? From our
mm,
culture at home that the family when we eat together, those
Mm.
kinds of upbringing.
I would say, yeah, I had this friend in Singapore. He's a Singapore citizen now, but but he originally came from Indonesia. And then he always was vocal about how he likes Filipinos. Like he said, oh, he really loves going to the Philippines, and the people there, they're so warm. And if they talk to you, you get the sense that they really genuinely want to serve you or to make you happy. Whereas he said, like, oh, in Indonesia, they're just faking it. I don't know why you say about it, say that about his own people. But anyway, so I think that's the kind of thing that people usually say, not just him, but about their own other nationalities as well, right? Maybe that's what you
Yeah,
mean.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly. So, and as well, again, my husband, the number one fan of Filipinos. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's part of his bias, but
Uh-huh.
even before we met, he was
Mm.
also like, "Oh, Filipinos are warm and friendly and very hardworking."
Yeah.
And so, how about the food? Because we are not really known for being in fine dining.
No, yeah, not at all. I think my experience was, for me, of course, I love Filipino food because that's what I grew up eating, right? So when I moved abroad, I guess I missed Filipino food because if it reminds you of home. So I didn't even realize that my favorite food was Filipino cuisine until I left the Philippines. You know what I mean? Like back then in
Ah,
the Philippines, if people ask, "So what's your favorite?" I would say, "Oh, Italian," or something like that. But then I moved abroad and then I was surprised that I missed the simple food back home, even like the galunggong, or you know what I mean? It was
yeah,
very
yeah.
simple things, sinigang, adobo. Adobo was like too mainstream, so I didn't realize that how much I loved it until I moved to Singapore. And if I had a choice, like in a Filipino restaurant, and you could only buy one dish, and I would usually choose adobo, which back home it was like very common, and I didn't realize that I loved it that much. Is what I mean. But the thing is, people who are non-Filipinos, they don't really have such a high regard of Filipino cuisine, right? Generally,
Yeah.
they find our food to be too salty or too sweet or too much generally. So some of them, I don't know if they're being honest or they're just like being polite. They would say, "Oh, introduce me to Filipino food," and then of course they would make some compliment, right? But I think I get the general impression that they're not really that impressed. All of the food, they would probably like one or something like that. Do you have the same impression? Like your husband, does he like any Filipino food,
He's a fan of Filipinos in general, but he's not
but
a
not the
fan of our
food?
cuisine.
Ah, yeah. No, but
Be-
that's normal. Don't
yeah,
worry about it.
yeah. But not the food like the main dish, but he's a
Mm.
fan of our desserts.
Oh yeah, that's
So
fine.
the sweet stuff, so the
That's
mango
good. Yeah.
float, and we are very known for mangoes, right? Especially for Cebu. And I was always like, oh, mangoes here are very good. Then he
Mm.
asked, what is the difference between this mango and this mango, like the green mango? I cannot really explain it properly because I'm also not that knowledgeable about mangoes because it's too
Mm-hmm.
normal for us. Like this is
Yeah.
a green mango, this is a yellow mango.
I mean, but the green mango is the ripe green mango, or is it the sour green mango?
The sour one. So it's a different breed, right?
Yeah, yeah, but the thing is, they are not used to having green mangoes, right? Like most people do not like sour food. And in the Philippines, I just realized while talking to Ray in another episode about what we like, I just realized that we really like to snack on sour food, like sour fruits, the kamyas, the
I'm
santol,
not into. I
the
don't like sour
yeah,
fruits.
yeah, but the thing is, it's not common like in Singapore. They don't sell sour fruits as snacks. Unlike in the Philippines, it's street food, like green mangoes, that sort of thing. So I guess we like a wide range of food. We like very salty food, we like very sour food. We also like very sweet food. I think our desserts are a bit too sweet, I realized. Again, that's something you realize only after you move abroad. And then when you go back home and then you go to Goldilocks or something, say, "Oh my God, the cake here is way too sweet."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I still love leche flan though.
About
Mm.
Jollibee. So,
Okay.
are you a big fan of Jollibee? Because a lot of foreigners always associate us with Jollibee.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Jollibee abroad, and they're probably wondering why the heck is there always like such a long queue. And that's why they're curious about it. Like Singapore, when they first launched Jollibee there in 2013, people queued there for 2 or 3 hours, I think, just because it's the first time there was a Jollibee, right? Which is ridiculous. So I guess they got curious as well. But the Singaporeans actually like the fried chicken in Jollibee. Maybe not so much the rest, But yeah, I think one of our episodes, right, in our podcast is about us interviewing Singaporeans about Jollibee, and a lot of them actually like it. But to me, honestly, I did grow up eating Jollibee because that's the norm. But I didn't really like Chicken Joy growing up. Surprisingly, I don't know why. I don't think I was a fan of chicken before, maybe, or fried chicken to be specific. I like masarsa food, adobo. I prefer that
Ah,
over like
okay.
fried food. I don't like dry food. Yeah, that would be me. But of course, as you know, Ray is such a huge, huge, huge fan of Jollibee. I'm
Yes.
just okay with it, I would think. For me, I think the reason why I like it is usually nostalgia. It's not because I personally super love the taste, to be honest. What about you?
So I'm on the same boat as you, but I like the chicken joy, but I wasn't really like super huge fan. But if I
Mm,
compare the chicken,
mm.
again, this is a long episode about food, but if I compare the chicken between KFC, McDonald's, and Jollibee,
Ah,
Jollibee tops the fried chicken.
okay. That's good
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
also I wasn't a fan of all the other things.
I mean, I think now that I've tried the chicken everywhere, I think yeah, I would say that the Jollibee actually does make good chicken, right? I think it's because they seem to marinate the chicken, so it's not the inside also has like a taste. Maybe that's what makes it good.
And the gravy also. I'm so detailed about the food, but yeah, the gravy,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I
is
think it's okay.
different.
But in the Philippines, my favorite chicken was actually KFC because of the gravy, since you're talking about the gravy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's why it didn't really make a mark for me before Jollibee anyway, because my favorite was KFC. But then the KFC in Singapore and here in Hong Kong does not taste the same as the KFC in Philippines, or they don't really have the same gravy or something. So I prefer the Jollibee because of that. Yes, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, I
now we're
agree.
hungry. Okay.
so
Mhm.
so speaking of
Mm,
famous restaurants like Jollibee, we move on to famous people. So when we are talking to non-Filipinos,
mm.
whenever, oh, you're from the Philippines, Duterte, something like that. Do you also experience the same?
Yeah, it's either Duterte or Pacquiao, of course, because I think he's probably the most popular Filipino right now, right? Like, I don't know anybody else that people would know. That would be surprising. Even the Miss Universe, not everyone follows Miss Universe as much as the
Yeah.
Filipinos do. Like in Singapore, they're all surprised when I told them that in the Philippines, like Miss Universe is such a big deal. And they're like, huh? Why? Like, nobody cares about Miss Universe over there. I don't know about Hong Kong, but yeah. So nobody knows that we won Miss Universe a few times in the past decade or so. But of course, everybody knows who Manny Pacquiao is, and I think Duterte, you're right. When Duterte, especially when he first won, which was what year, 2016 or something. So yeah, usually people when you first meet them and they find out you're Filipino, they would make some comment, oh, Duterte is a good president, something like that, or oh, Manny Pacquiao, he's a good boxer, that's what
Yeah.
they usually say.
Although some disagree about even at that time,
Mm.
so a lot of people have mixed opinions about Duterte.
Ah,
So
yeah, yeah.
of course we don't talk politics here, but yeah, they
Yes,
do
yes.
have different opinions about it. And
Uh,
speaking of which, these are famous people that everyone know, but Filipinos ourselves, we are big into people who have Filipino genes. So it's like all
yes.
people who sing well are Filipinos. So
Uh-huh.
namely like Bruno Mars
Oh,
or
yeah.
Enrique Iglesias. So
Oh,
it's not very common from non-Filipinos, but in the Philippines, like everyone who has a Filipino gene, even it's like a 1%, we know who they are.
yeah, we claim them. Like we have Filipino pride. If somebody has Filipino blood, you're right. Even if no matter how small, we like to claim that for some reason. Yeah. I don't think that's very common. For example, Singaporean. I never heard them say, "Oh, that guy he's half Singaporean." Like they don't really care about those things. It's not like us. You're right. Like, oh, he's half Filipino. Oh, his mom is half Filipino. Like, it's such a big deal to us. We really claim Filipino pride. That's why when somebody Filipino accomplishes something, we feel as though somehow we also accomplished it or whatever. Like, even though we had nothing to do with that person, or even though we had never even met that person. Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
maybe it depends on the industry. I would say, let's say, for example,
Mm.
Olympics. So, like Aussies, they are very proud
Oh
about
yeah,
like
yeah.
Aussie. So maybe Filipinos take it to a next level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would think so. When the person is representing their country, of course, normally Australians, Singaporeans, they would be proud of that person, right? Because they are representing Singapore. If, like, for example, a half Singaporean person won American Idol or whatever, I don't think that they would be like, oh, that guy is half Singaporean. I don't think I've heard them do that from what I remember.
On the other hand, if half Filipino has won, let's say, the American Idol, then we will be tackling that one later on. The close family ties. So Filipinos are very known for having close family ties. And I've noticed in your episode as well that you've briefly talked about this sandwich generation. We
Mm.
tend to send money, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the OFWs are also contributing to the money generation in the
Yeah.
Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not that we do have to though. I think if you don't, people are gonna talk. Unfortunately, you do have to, right? It's an obligation, kind of. Except the maybe the rich ones or whatever. But usually, everyone who is on FW sends money back home. It's probably because the people back home they didn't really have the circumstances to have money to begin with, right? Like that's the reason why people need to leave in order to earn money abroad, which are, bigger if you send it back. And also, at the same time, we have this really terrible way of how we handle money in the Philippines. For example, a lot of people don't save for retirement. A lot of people have like attitude, right? Or God will take care of us or whatever,
Yeah, like
right?
God will provide.
Yes, God will provide. Exactly. So there is that kind of mentality, unfortunately, in the Philippines for a lot of people, right? Especially the poor people. They're very poor. They don't even have enough money to feed themselves. And yet they have like so many children, for example, because their mentality is God will provide. Because God is the one who made us pregnant to begin with. So He's not going to give us something that we will not be able to survive, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually a very common mentality in the Philippines, which, okay, growing up, maybe it seems like, oh, that's good, right? That's probably good, but not really. If I think about it now, it's not really a good mentality to,
Yeah.
yeah, you need to prepare, right? Like, I don't know why is that like that. I remember when I was a kid, like people were maybe the aunties or whatever were talking about it. Like, oh, do you know in the US, before they have kids, they would say, can we afford a child? Before they actually go and make a child. And then they're like very amazed about that. Like, but now, why was that something to be amazed by, right? That should have been what you were thinking of instead of like just doing whatever and just hoping that God will provide somehow for your
Exactly.
kids. Yeah.
And
So,
similar to that, I have recent conversations with relatives, and they told me to have a kid now because,
mm,
of course, of the age and everything, which we've
mm.
also tackled in your episode.
Yes, yes.
So, Zesties, listen to that episode.
Uh-huh.
So, I told them that I have to plan because I might not be able to work for a year or so and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? So,
Mm.
and then there's no nanny here. I mean, there's nanny, but can
It's
can
very
we afford a
expensive,
nanny?
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I told them a glimpse of what was on my mind
Mm.
and what I receive as a answer. If you think about it a lot, then God will not give you kids because you're thinking about it too much.
Oh my gosh. But you shouldn't think about it, right? Yeah, that's a problem. We rely too much on God for things.
But the religion as well, D will always say you should rely on God for all things, right?
Yeah, but I mean, but there is actually a story about that, about believing too much in God, but then like there's this guy who supposedly got trapped. I can't remember if he was trapped in a flood or whatever. And then like he said, God, please help me or whatever. And then like there were a lot of people who tried to help him, but he let them go. And then in the end, he said, God, why didn't you help me? And God said, I already sent you like a lot of people and you didn't say yes to them. So God will provide, but also you need to be wise enough to do the work, right? Like you shouldn't expect a miracle that, okay, my kids are starving and then God will just suddenly throw food at your door or whatever. You need to work for it as well. You need to have the means to support your kids. And that is the reason why a lot of families in the Philippines are poor because of this mentality, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, yeah, regarding family, it is good that we have close knit family ties. That is admirable. But also, other people would say it's bad. Ray mentioned in Japan, that's actually considered negative. That they say, oh, you're Filipino, so you must have you're very close to your family, right? But that not a good thing because that means
Yeah.
you just send all your money to the Philippines and you do not leave anything for yourself. And as a result, you suffer.
And also here, cannot comprehend at all that why we are helping. Why am I sending money? But of course, if I don't
Mm.
send money, how will
How
they
will they
survive?
survive? Exactly. Yes, that's the problem.
And it's like
Yeah.
already just, like a circle. It's
Mm.
like really, it's a rabbit
Yeah.
hole.
So my friend is Filipino and then her husband is not. And I think her husband told her about this documentary or something about this Filipino nurse, I don't know, based somewhere abroad, who sent most of her money to the Philippines, right? And then she was the one who was sacrificing abroad to the point that nothing became of her in the end because all the money was sent back home. That's also not good. I mean, it's okay if you send money back home because they really don't have the means, as long as they're also helping themselves. But unfortunately, there are a lot of families who don't. Like they say, "Oh, it's fine. I don't need to work because ate is sending me money," and that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate. When we were in the Philippines, we are homogenous, right? Although we
Mm.
have like expats and stuff, like people coming in and tourists, but as a whole, we are more of a homogenous society. And
Mm.
in that sense, we are kind of racially insensitive. I don't know if that's the
Mm.
word,
Yeah, I guess
but
so. Yeah.
we tend to be not sensitive enough when we say things, particular things or comments to other nationalities. And for us, it might not mean anything or it's not
Mm.
offensive, but other nationalities might feel it offensive.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. For example, the Philippines, it was common for us to describe someone by his race, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, that Bombay, or that's actually what we call the Indians for some reason, right? Because they're from Bombay, I guess. I don't know, or Negro. I think because the first Indians who probably went to the Philippines were wearing the turban. I think you meant the turban, right?
Ah,
Probably. I
okay.
have no idea, but that's what we call them, right? And
Yeah,
right?
and it's a very offensive word for
Yes.
other nationalities. So
Uh-huh.
we are sorry if somebody might have
Yeah,
told
yeah.
you this, guys. But yeah, it's just maybe a bit of education in terms of racial sensitivity. And
Yeah.
how about on the other end as well? I don't know if you heard about it before that there was this American TV show, and then talking to a Filipino nurse. It was a TV show, like just not a reality show, but just
Mm.
a series. And
Okay.
then there was this Filipino nurse. It was a medical drama or something, and then commented something not really offensive, but in a way that that doctor was not approving of that Filipino nurse. I don't know if you heard about that story
No.
before, and then
I
the
haven't.
Filipinos were very offended. And then there was
Ah.
like it was like other side of the coin that we felt
Mm.
offended. It was trending on Twitter, and then everyone was complaining about it.
But
Yeah.
actually, speaking of that, Filipinos are very sensitive, right? As we said earlier, we have Filipino pride. So if somebody Filipino does something, then you feel you're part of it. So it's the same way, right? If somebody, for example, wasn't it Justin Bieber? He said something about Manny Pacquiao. I can't remember what exactly. But then like people got really mad about it as well. Like, how dare you, blah blah blah. But when I looked at okay, what exactly did he say? It was just some kind of meme. For me, it was a meme. People mock each other all the time using memes. Wasn't a big deal, but a lot of people were offended. They felt it was a slight against Filipinos. And there's a lot of those as well. Like, for example, I think Claire Danes made some comment about Manila being ghastly or something like that many years ago. People again were offended. And then there's a lot of moments where we don't even allow people to go to the Philippines, right? Persona non grata, I think is the term.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So like, oh, because you said this comment against Filipinos, you are now a persona non grata, which means they are not allowed to fly to the Philippines, I think. And
Mm.
it's actually a government sanctioned thing. It's not like just some random people. So we are very sensitive about
That's the other side of the coin, right?
yeah. We do not like it when people insult Filipinos. Yes.
So before we wrap up, as we mentioned before, that the famous Filipinos are very good at singing.
Uh-huh.
So have you also received comments that in Hong Kong or Singapore that Filipinos are known for singing?
In Hong Kong, not yet, but In Singapore, yes, that was a very common comment actually. Like a lot of people would say such a thing also. And like, oh, you're Filipino, you must be a good singer. That's the assumption.
Here it's not common, but there was
Mm.
a TikTok or an Instagram video that I
Mm.
saw from a comedian named June Lee Comedy. So
Mm.
he was basically doing a skit. So there was a time that when God was making Filipinos, and
Mm.
then God was saying to his secretary, so he said that make the Filipinos good at dancing. And so the
Mm.
secretary jotted it down and say with some swagger then, so can we make them bad at singing to offset it? And then
Mm.
God said, no, they will be way better at singing. So the San Pedro or the secretary said, but God, that's not fair. Can at least we make them ugly? Then
Mm.
God said, no, they are beautiful. And then the secretary walked away and murmured that, okay, I'll make them shorter. That was a skit. I was not as funny as the video, but you can look it up. It's at John Lee Comedy. So yeah,
Okay.
that was
Mm-hmm.
about the singing part. So
Yeah, but we are shorter, yes. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, my friend and I, we're both Filipinas. We always like to complain whenever we go shopping and we see like really nice maxi dresses, and but then we need to have that sewn up, right? Because it's too long.
Yeah,
Yeah, or
also me, the Zara
mm,
ready-made pants, I can't. It's too long for me,
yeah,
unfortunately.
or the long sleeve tops as well, right?
Ah,
It's way
yeah,
too long.
yeah.
Like,
All right. So speaking of singing and karaoke,
mm.
so what is your favorite song to sing, D?
Karaoke, I love to sing Before I Let You Go. That is a song by Freestyle, which is actually an OPM or original Pinoy music band, but it's the song is in English. Now that song is very is actually a sad song. It's about it's a song that you sing to someone who left you behind, and that originally started as my breakup song when my ex-boyfriend left me. At the time, I really felt it and all that, but then I realized, hey, my voice agrees with this song, so I just like to sing it from then on.
Ah,
Even though I don't feel heartbroken about it anymore, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's the song I
yeah.
go to. How about you?
So me, it might be so different, but I really like to rap the Linkin Park songs
Oh
in
wow,
karaoke.
okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
I was with a bunch of friends here in Australia, like neighbors, and then we went to a karaoke because our neighbor's wife, which is now also our neighbor, is a Filipino. And then we
Mm.
went to karaoke, and then I sang the Linkin Park song, and then they were very surprised. And a little girl will, rap
Mm.
this
Mm-hmm.
Linkin Park song. So yeah, it was fun. I kind of
And
miss
you're
karaoke though.
Yeah, I actually do miss karaoke as well, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I think it's not safe to go and sing karaoke.
But before, was it common there, the karaoke?
In Singapore, yes, there were also like the VIP rooms, like in the Philippines, we had those, right? Yeah, we did have those in Singapore as well. And we usually went out, like Ray and our friends, we would go and sing. And sometimes there would even be Tagalog songs as well.
Oh, really? In
Yeah.
Singapore? Ah,
Yeah, but not
so that's
like
how how we are, or
yeah,
they really?
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but it's not that extensive. If I remember, the first time I went to sing karaoke in Singapore, right? And that's the thing. They call it karaoke in Singapore, but in the Philippines we called it videoke, right?
Really karaoke for
Yeah,
us?
in Manila, it was called videoke. So
Ah,
yeah, and then or maybe that was back then. Anyways, because karaoke is the one without the video. Remember in the
was it?
past in the Philippines, yeah,
Ah,
and then the moment there were videos, it became videoke. I don't know, maybe
okay.
it was just in
No, I
Zamboanga.
I I noticed the video okay as well. Like I heard that, but I
Mm,
think when I was with my friends back then after work, like we just called it karaoke. But
mm.
yeah, I heard the video okay, but I thought that the video okay was the older version.
No, I think it's because it's a karaoke with the video, like a music
Oh,
video. That's why it was called videoke. But anyway, it's still called karaoke everywhere else in the world. So I think that's why I'm used to it again as karaoke. And we went to karaoke, and then they said, "Oh, you should sing a Filipino song because there are Filipino songs in that karaoke." But their songs were only just all starting with letter D. I don't know why. And then, okay, and then for some reason the first song I recognized was Dadalhin. by Regine Velasquez, the
Para I
dancing.
thought it was Paraiso, the
Nice D,
the
right?
title
So
of that
it's
song.
Dadalhin. So they asked me to sing it, and then okay, I obliged and I sang it, and then they were like, they don't know what the song is about, right? So they started like dancing and laughing. I said, I wanted to say, this is a very sad song. Why are you dancing this way? But yeah,
Oh.
yeah, that's what we have in Singapore. We did have Filipino songs, and yes, they also consider Filipinos as good singers. And in fact, in the Philippines, I am not considered like a good singer. I'm not a terrible singer, but I was just considered average or whatever. I'm not gonna win a contest, you know what I mean? But in Singapore, like a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're a very good singer." So I think it's like
Oh.
different.
Really, the because our bar is high, right?
Yeah, yeah, they have different standards. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was surprised, like, really, are you sure? Like, nobody says that in the Philippines to me, because in the Philippines there are like way better singers, right? Like those people who go sing in amateur contests or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and those who can reach those high
Yes,
notes.
exactly. Yeah, I had friends like that who they are the known singers, the soprano types of voices. So yeah.
I hope that our zesties were have now like a bit of understanding or a glimpse on how Filipinos are.
Mm-hmm.
And as we mentioned earlier that the stereotypes is sometimes or most of the time two sides of the coin that we have this we have this trait that shows to other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the other people have a certain understanding about us, but it's not only about say telling. It's
Mm-hmm.
not it's I cannot wrap this up, but maybe I'll wrap it up later, D.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
before we end
Mm-hmm.
this, D, please invite our zesties to please invite our zesties for your podcast.
Right. Okay. So, hi, Zesties. I am, I think she already introduced our podcast at the beginning, but our podcast is called Banana Q, a Filipino flavored podcast. So, our podcast is hosted by me and Bray. We were both born and raised in the Philippines, and then we moved to Singapore where we became colleagues, and then we eventually moved to Hong Kong me and Japan for Ray. And then yeah, we both are describe our friends as enthusiastic storytellers. So we thought we would start a podcast so that we could spread our funny and insightful conversations. And please give us a listen. We actually have Glee on there. We Glee was a guest on two of our episodes actually, and one of those episodes was the reason why she realized that she liked talking in a podcast and started her own. So please give us a listen. It's bananaqpodcast.com, or just look for Banana Q on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you, Dee, for sharing your experiences and insights on the show.
Thank you.